Hi, welcome to Marlon Reviews. Today I've got a bit of a different video. As opposed to a review, I'm going to be explaining why I think Kanye's Yeezus is such a significant album in his discography. I vividly remember when Yeezus came out, and contrary to what you might think and what this video's title might suggest, I hated it on the first listen. I remember trying to convince my friends that Magna Carta Holy Grail was a superior album, and in hindsight we can all see how ridiculous that idea is. Yeezus, personally, is one of the most important albums to come out in my lifetime, and I think this is because of the time in my life when it came out. I was 16, I'd just come out of secondary school, and I attribute Yeezus to diversifying my musical taste. Prior to Yeezus, I had a very narrow scope of the types of music that I would listen to. As much as I love this album, I just wanted to preface this video just by saying my personal connection to the album and how I've come to engage with it so much. For the most part of this video, I'll be trying to separate my personal connection with the album from its cultural significance. I feel Yeezus was released at one of the most significant points in Kanye's career. Now, a lot of people refer to the self-exile he put himself in after the Taylor Swift incident, where he recorded My Beautiful Doctor to Fantasy in Hawaii. After that album came out, it was immediately unanimously praised, and it was getting perfect ratings from music publications and so on. Every album preceding Dark Fantasy had led up to this, so every component of every Kanye album that had come before had influenced the sound of My Beautiful Doctor to Fantasy. You had the soul elements from College Dropout, you had the lush string arrangements from Late Registration, and then you obviously had the auto-tune from 808s and Heartbreak, and you had the anthemic stadium-like sound that came with Graduation. Dark Fantasy was Kanye's ultimate comeback story, and everyone likes an underdog. I think that's why this album resonated so well, as well as the music being amazing. And of course, less than a year on, him and Jay-Z released Watch the Throne, which again was immediately loved by millions of people around the world. The reason why I feel that Yeezus was released at such a crucial point in his career is that it had almost the impossible task of following up perceived perfection. Dark Fantasy was hailed as his magnum opus, its rap perfection, so to speak. Everyone loved Dark Fantasy, and for very good reasons. It is genuinely an amazing album. What I find particularly interesting is how an artist can even begin to tackle following up perfection, and what Kanye did was to completely dismantle that notion with Yeezus. Of course, every Kanye album has a distinct sound to it, so I don't feel anyone was expecting Dark Fantasy Part 2. So all of his fanbase, me included, we were expecting something different, but I don't think anyone was expecting Yeezus. So just from some of the basic information we started getting about Yeezus, we could already see how different it was from everything else in his discography. Aside from Ye, which came out last year, it's easily his shortest album, clocking in at just over 40 minutes. He was starting to recruit more left field experimental producers to collaborate with. For example, we had Arca, who's known for his quite industrial, disjointed, and at times disturbing approach to production. If you haven't listened to Arca, I'd suggest going and listen to Whip from his self-titled album and tell me you're not thoroughly disturbed. Kanye was living in Paris at the time, and he said he was being very heavily influenced by minimalism, and he even boldly claimed that one of his biggest inspirations for Yeezus was a single lamp. And of course, infamously, Kanye enlisted the help of Rick Rubin, who's produced for literally everyone in the music industry. I think it was about 2 weeks before the album was expected to come out, to strip back the album and make it even more bare bones and minimal than it already was. So all of these factors, coupled with the promotional singles we got, which was New Slaves and Black Skinhead, and the non-existent album art, all pointed to something very different from anything Kanye had released before. The first sounds we hear is the song On Sight, and I feel this song does two very important things for this album. The first thing is it's essentially the album's manifesto for its themes of anger and rebellion and frustration. The second thing it tells you is that this is nothing like Kanye has ever done before. Kanye's always had a knack for creating easy listening, catchy, opening songs to his albums which draw the audience in immediately. You've got Good Morning, you've got Dark Fantasy, you've got Say You Will, you've got We Don't Care. All of these songs are iconic songs in Kanye's discography. However, Kanye specifically chooses to go with one of the most jarring, abrasive songs on the entire album to open up with. With the first song, he's already dismantled the idea that this album can be anything like you've heard from Kanye before. The standout moment for me in this song is the extremely meta way he chooses to address this fact. So after the first verse, the extremely electro-aggressive thumping instrumental gives way for this heavenly choir, and they sing, he'll give us what we need, it may not be what we want. What we need as Kanye fans and as general music consumers is something new, something to challenge our perceptions, something to break the mold. And what we want is the classic Kanye sound. But we all know, Kanye knows himself, that he can do the chopped up, high-pitched soul sampling for days on. He can do it in his sleep. And I feel him repeating this process over and over again would just cause him to stagnate. And I think Kanye, more so than most artists in the industry, is one who always looks to the future, looks to progress, looks to further his sound. Like Kanye says on New Slaves, you're about to turn it up, I'm about to tear shit down. Which is, he's tearing up the safe and tried and tested formula that a lot of artists use just to generate sales. Now, I think to call this album minimalist is a bit misleading, because you've still got all the core elements of Kanye's previous albums. You've got soul samples, you've got electronic beats, you've got beautiful string arrangements. I think the major difference is that in the case of Yeezus, these elements aren't weaved into songs extravagantly and with pretense to them. On New Slaves, the song shifts from its original instrumentation to this beautiful guitar sample where Kanye sings with Frank Ocean, and it's done without warning. It just happens instantly and you do not expect it. Yet New Slaves remains such a powerful and beautiful song at times. And it's this example that I point to describe Yeezus as Kanye deconstructing his own sound. And I think this is relevant when it comes to people claiming that Yeezus, or people reacting to claims that Yeezus is his best album or their personal favorite Kanye album. I feel the reaction to this claim is either you don't know anything about hip hop, or you're too young, you only know the new Kanye. Both of which are not valid arguments in my opinion. Now, I can only speak for myself here, but when I personally describe Yeezus as my favorite Kanye album, and I recognize it as him deconstructing his own sound, I feel to make such a statement, I have to be aware of what that sound is in the first place. I'm deeply attached to every single Kanye album and appreciate them for the works of art that they are. The reason Yeezus resonates with me so much is that it challenged my preconceived notions about what a Kanye song is meant to sound like, or what a hip-hop song is meant to sound like at all. All of these notions were completely chucked out the window, and I feel it's all the better for making this album stand the test of time. Now, in terms of the lyrical content of Yeezus, again, I feel the lyrics in large portions play off the preconceived notions you have about Kanye and about general hip-hop lyrics. The song I'm In It is a perfect example of this. It's essentially hip-hop turned up to 11. Every single element of the song is exaggerated to the extreme. So he says, "Black girl sipping white wine, put my fist in her like a civil rights sign," which has been stuck in my head for 6 years now. And of course, with a Kanye song, there's the customary religious allusions, like he calls himself a rap-lick priest. It's how I interpret the song. It's an over-the-top, almost absurdist take on hip-hop culture. When I think of this song, I always think back to Kanye's interview with Zane Lowe just after Yeezus dropped, and specifically the part where he was expressing his frustration about being pigeonholed into things he can and can't do or is not allowed to do. I specifically remember him being extremely frustrated by the notion that when the public hears a rapper say, I'm a gangster, or I'm a pimp, or I'm a nigger, no one bats an eye. But when he tries to break free of those stereotypes, everyone says, who do you think you are? I'm in it, to me, is Kanye turning the lens back to his critics and saying, so you think rappers are all like this? Okay, I'm going to be the hedonistic, sex-crazed, stereotypical rapper that you think I am. I don't see how anyone can possibly take this song literally. It's hip-hop exaggerated. It's in my mind, it's one of the most satirical songs Kanye's ever made. Anger and frustration are two of the core themes that drive Yeezus, and it provides for some of the most significant social commentary that Kanye's made throughout his entire career to date. Now, I feel the centerpiece for this frustration and anger is definitely New Slaves. In New Slaves, he draws parallels to how his mother grew up in a generation of extreme racial discrimination, and how he himself has been held back from pursuing certain artistic endeavors because of who he is or who he's perceived to be. I feel the most significant indicator of this is where he says, doing clothes you would have thought I had help, but they weren't satisfied unless I picked the cotton myself. Another significant line in New Slaves is where he says, you see there's broke nigger racism, that's the don't touch anything in the store. There's rich nigger racism, that's come in, please buy more. And when I think of this line, it's him taking shots at the extreme capitalist nature of the music industry, and specifically the hip-hop industry. And sometimes I think back to this line and I think, did he influence To Pimp a Butterfly directly? Because that is the entire theme of that album. When Kanye says, you used to only be niggers, now everybody playing. I think this is the point where Kanye saw class as the main dividing factor in America as opposed to race. And I think that's an extremely bold and risky move to make in hip-hop, because a lot of hip-hop is, especially political hip-hop, is really racially driven. And of course the second verse, which Kanye claimed to be the best rap verse of all time, covers a wide range of topics. It covers privatization of prisons, it covers his relationship with the paparazzi. I'd love to go and dissect this song line by line, but I'd be here all day just gushing over it. Blood on the Leaves, in my opinion, is one of the greatest things Kanye has ever produced. And I think the reason for this is it brings together elements that on paper should not work together at all. So on the song, you've got these loud, overblown, blasting horn samples from the production duo Tonight. And then you've got Kanye singing about past failed relationships, and I think most significantly you've got the sample of Nina Simone's rendition of Strange Fruit, in my opinion one of the most haunting songs to ever be recorded. Kanye sings about a failed relationship. I feel he's talking about a gold digger, so to speak. I think the line that stands out to me is him saying, you got a $2,000 bag but no cash in your purse. Thematically, the song closely resembles the themes that were all over My Beautiful Dark Twisted Fantasy, but sonically it couldn't be more different to the sounds that we heard on that album. And I feel this 6 years later now, and this song still sounds futuristic and ahead of its time. And I feel his collaboration game on Yeezus was like peering into the future. A large majority of the collaborators on Yeezus are still making waves today, 6 years later. Arca's gone on to work with Frank Ocean and Bjork, for example. Hudson Mohawk has now gone on to work with Pusha T and Drake and A$AP Rocky and even Lil Wayne. Travis Scott contributed to some of the production on Yeezus, and he's undoubtedly become an A-list top-tier hip-hop artist performing at the top of his game. And of course, Yeezus features collaborations from long-time collaborators like No ID and Mike Dean and Kid Cudi. I feel it's this willingness to combine the old and the new which makes Yeezus so special. And of course, collaboration doesn't inherently guarantee artistic greatness. Every DJ Khaled album, for example, has hundreds of collaborators and producers and writers and singers, but the outcome of most of these collaborations are trash. Experimentation doesn't guarantee success either. That's the nature of experimentation. You're taking a risk and you don't know whether it's going to come out terrible or it's going to be amazing. If Yeezus turned out terrible, I feel there'd still be a section of devoted Kanye fans, which I include myself in, that would praise him for trying something different. They'd be like, it might have turned out bad, but at least he was trying something different. But I feel that wouldn't be enough for Kanye. I feel if this album failed, his next album would have been even more experimental and even more left field. Now, I feel the greater influence of Yeezus can't be understated. By no means is Kanye the first to experiment with these types of sound in hip-hop. You've got Death Grips who've been doing it for years, where they've fused punk aesthetics with loud, abrasive, industrial noise elements with rapping. But I feel that the difference is no one has made it as accessible and mainstream as Kanye has. I don't have any doubts in my mind that this production line that we have of new SoundCloud rappers coming out it seems like every single week with these loud, murky, abrasive, distorted beats weren't influenced by Yeezus. Even some of the very best music coming out today, you can see the influence of Yeezus. Igor came out less than a month ago, and the opening song on there, Igor's theme, sounds incredibly similar to the opening of On Sight. I feel Yeezus has paved the way for successful and mainstream artists to begin experimenting with their sound and having the security that their fan base won't desert them because they've seen the success that Kanye has had with experimenting with different sounds. I'm not saying this hasn't happened before in popular music. Radiohead confused everyone by releasing Kid A after OK Computer, and it's now hailed as one of the greatest albums ever made. What I am saying is this has allowed already successful artists to keep on challenging themselves and not stick to tried and tested formulas in order to pursue artistic greatness. So one of the collaborators on Yeezus, Frank Ocean, in 2012 he released Channel Orange, which was one of the most beloved R&B albums to come out in a long time. And how does he follow that up? He doesn't drop anything for 4 years, and he drops an album influenced by indie rock and soul and 1960s pop music. One of Kanye's other collaborators, Travis Scott, last year released Sicko Mode, which everyone knows. Sicko Mode has no chorus, and it has 2 abrupt beat shifts, which is similar to how some of the songs on Yeezus were structured. Sicko Mode was the prime example of popular and accessible experimental hip-hop. In parts it was abrasive and disjointed, but it managed to reach #1 in America. It was one of the biggest songs of last year. Now, I think the artists that have been remembered as one of the most influential of their generation have always had pieces of work, or that one piece of work which challenged preconceptions about them. For example, you had Radiohead had Kid A, Bowie had his Berlin trilogy, Miles Davis had Bitches Brew, Outkast had Aquemini, and I feel in retrospect Yeezus will be remembered in a similar fashion. My argument isn't that Yeezus is his best album, because that's a subjective opinion. We can argue about this for days about which Kanye album is the best. My argument is that it is the most significant album in his career so far. I want to end this video just by returning back to my personal connection with the album. Prior to Yeezus, I wouldn't say I was musically close-minded, but I did tend to favour music that I'd already been exposed to. So a lot of the music I was listening to for the most part was R&B, hip-hop, soul. Give or take a few exceptions, that was the limit of my musical scope. After I listened to Yeezus multiple times and I started reading up about the nature of experimental music and what it even was, I started dipping my toe into different genres. After Yeezus came out, my love affair with Radiohead started, and they are now my favourite band ever. Like previously mentioned, I got into Death Grips after reading about their fusion of experimental music and hip-hop. I started trying out ambient music and jazz and metal and lo-fi music. Of course, none of these types of music are inherently superior or inferior to any other genre. I still love R&B and pop and soul. I attribute Yeezus both directly and indirectly to finding my way to discovering some of my eventual favourite albums and artists of all time. And I feel this would not have happened without Yeezus in my life. Thank you guys for watching. Make sure to let me know down in the comments below what album or artist you think I should talk about next. Make sure to like and subscribe and dong the bell, and I'll see you next time.